started.
Yeah,
So good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, Rajiv. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. How are you?
I'm so far so good. That's the best statement at the moment.
Yes,
So it's been really good. First of all, thank you so much, Ketan, for accepting the invite and willing to be part of this course. I would definitely want to submit here that you were one of the early guests I spoke with on LinkedIn after we connected, and you were all excitingly more than willing to join this event and be part of
absolutely.
this. So thank you so much for doing that. Such a pleasure to have you, Ketan.
Same here. And I see you are kind of back in your office, looks like.
Yeah. I've been coming to office all along.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs, we have no choice. Alright. So before we get started, let me formally introduce you to the audience. So good evening, everyone. Welcome again to the Leaders and Libraries event. And we have yet another guest, Ketan Krishna, who calls himself the ordinary guy with extraordinary dreams. Multiple hats, right? You see a mic there, so he's got a studio set up for himself. He's a career coach, he's a corporate speaker, he is an author. Oh my God, what all? And he's also the incidentally head of HR of Rentomojo as an organization. So Ketan, I'll put that in the last. The rest of the bit I'll put it in the first. So amazing guy, tremendous energy. You guys should go and look up his website, listen to his talk. I was very inspired and impressed, and I didn't know about him earlier, but I've been following him for some time on LinkedIn, and that's when I thought I should definitely have Ketan as a guest. And Ketan has been a lovely association. Thank you so much for joining and being part of it. I completely appreciate
Rajiv, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words.
that. Super. So let's get into the event right away. I'm all excited to talk to you. First question comes from my side to you. Books and Ketan, tell me about this beautiful romantic relationship.
Yeah, the most important thing, Rajiv, is that the romance started a lot later than when it should have happened.
Mhm.
And I'll take you back a little bit. So after my initial 10 years of career, with where I worked with Aditya Birla Group and then I worked with Utsav Fashion, I, I come from a good B school, so a lot of things were favoring me.
Mm.
And I remember the first book that was given to me was by one of my joint presidents at Aditya Birla Group, and I was working on this concept of engagement,
Mm.
and she extended this book called First Break All the Rules.
Mm.
Now, it was a personally signed book that was given to me, but for 10 years, actually, I probably read 2 or 3 pages a year and
Mm.
left it, and then someday I will get energized and pick it up.
Mm.
It was not making sense. So I was not into books. 10 years, not a single book is that which I read. Now, I, of course, was giving myself excuses.
Mm.
Excuses in terms of I don't have time, I know it all, functional expertise is more, books do not help. There is a time when the, where I will have more time at hand to read books. So
Mm.
somewhere in my head, it was a leisure activity.
Okay.
Now, as luck had to have it, after my initial 10 years, one fine day, I lost my job. When I say lost my job, we were working in this company. Our idea was to raise fund, get some investors. We
Mm.
got some deals, but it was not exciting enough.
Mm.
And that's a moment the decision was taken that we will keep it low profile, which
Mm.
means professionals like me had very, very limited role to play there. So came back to my home, had no office to go. Initial 10-15 days were like absolutely amazing because enriching. But after initial 15 days is when I realized that, okay, I need to now get up and get into the market. And of course, I went into the market. I started reaching out to people. And honestly, I thought that anybody would hire me.
Mm.
And functionally, I could have still challenged then and now that, yes, I'd done a lot of stuff. Startup teaches you things that you would never imagine. I had learned enormously well functionally. And I still know that functionally I understand startups, organization, HR operations, performance management, setting it up, something that was a strength that I had.
Lovely.
I started getting some interview calls, but that took time. But what happened is in this entire process is I could not crack interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Now that got me worried. That got me look within. And one thing that I realized, Rajiv, was that in these 10 years, I had invested zero time and money in myself.
Okay.
Now, the power of personal growth is where what I learned. So I said this romance actually started then. I said, no, this is not something that I can let happen to me for a very, very large part of my life.
Lovely.
I had time then. All those excuses of I'm busy, this, that, I don't have time, I have to travel, so much work. Now, none of those excuses exist.
Mm.
Incidentally, the book that I picked up was Power of Habits.
Yeah. Good one.
It worked. It worked. It worked. It was not easy. After 10 years, when you're reading, I had to push myself. I literally had to push myself.
Yeah.
But one book and another book and another book. Since then, 3 years, I completed 36 of them. This year, I'm chasing a target of 60. I'm not very close to that goal, but I'm still chasing that. I want to make it happen. I've done about 14 for this year already. Of course, there's more that I need to push myself, but that's the kind of shift that has happened to me personally. And it is perhaps, and I remember parents, all people who, with a lot of wisdom, every successful CEO, everybody says, guys, read book, read book, read book. I did not do that. But this newfound love was extremely, extremely powerful, extremely important.
Beautiful.
And I wish if I can, if I have to relight my life and my career, there are two things that I'll do very early in my life: hire a coach and read books.
Oh, lovely.
Absolutely. I've evolved. I've learned a lot of concept, perspective, learnings. And I think the most powerful and the wonderful thing with that is that I could learn it in my own time.
Correct.
And that makes it very powerful. Nobody's teaching me saying that you have to finish this book.
Yeah, yeah.
But and the book that we are going to talk about somewhere talks about intrinsic motivation. So I had the need to read, and nothing could have stopped me. And that's what has happened. Not saying that it's been a lot number of books, but from where to where I reached, I feel proud about it. Where I want to go, yes, I'm going to continuously push
I'm sure.
myself
I'm
harder
sure.
and learn more and more about that.
Fantastic. Guys, all the budding leaders listening to Ketan, that's a very, very strong message. If he could rewind, he would hire a coach and read books. Well, I don't want to comment about hiring a coach for all of you guys, but reading, definitely, guys, please go and pick it up. It is so clearly coming that he almost says he has lost 10 years. He should have read enough and more. I think, guys, all of you should do that. Please go back and pick up the book after this conversation. This is getting interesting. I'm just rubbing my hands for the next question. That's so interesting. So tell me, Ketan, 10 years, no book, then one book, 36 books in 3 years, a target of what, 60, 70 books this year. Give me a promise first that you're going to send me the list of 40 books that you've finished first. That's the first promise I would love to have. Then I'll give the question if you say yes to that. Right?
Absolutely.
The
Right
question
after
is,
this call. Right after this call.
after the first book, Ketan the reader, how did it help evolve Ketan the leader?
Ha. I think multiple dimensions, but the most powerful and the at the core, it is about being flexible, being ready to acquire knowledge. And you remember this phrase that at least I used to get taught was that the fruits, the trees which have a lot of fruit are like flexible, so that people can come and pick up fruits from there, and they'll bend down, they'll not break when there's a lot of this is something I think knowledge does to me. It empowers me, it makes me flexible, it helps me not stay rigid to something that I believe in.
Right. Ketan, looks like your signal bandwidth is getting weaker a little. Your video is freezing up. Want to just check? I lost your audio as well, Ketan. Ketan, are you there? I think I lost you. Ketan, I think bandwidth issue, I lost you completely.
Okay. I was trying to fix that up. One
You
second.
want to check that so that we have a smooth flow in the rest of the conversation?
Yeah, I'm just checking. That's pretty unusual. Okay.
You sure?
Good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So,
Let's start.
Ketan, for interest of the audience, I'm going to repeat the question.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Ketan, the reader, how did it contribute to Ketan, the leader?
So, Rajiv, what it does and what it did to me at the core is help me stay flexible,
Right.
help me grow, and help me be open to possibilities and opportunities and point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to become a master and say, okay, what I know is the only version of truth.
Right.
I think this is what books have started to do to me.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps, and the reason I said books and coaches, I
Mm-hmm.
somehow see them to be similar,
Right.
because what it does is helps you look within and find answers. Now, what
Correct.
does book do? Book is a form like I can't meet that author, but his
Mm.
perspective and thought is what I'm able to bring to myself.
Correct.
And I'm able to validate some of my beliefs, learn new things, and see what all could get implemented.
Mm.
And many of them. Now the recent one is when I became an author almost
Mm.
about in the month of March. Okay, after 5 years of saying I will become an author, finally I became one day. Now, what changed for me was this one book by Robin Sharma called The 5 A.M. Club. Now, I was struggling at that point in time that how the hell do I take out time to even
Mm.
write when you're working full time?
Mm.
Read that book. Next day, I pushed myself. 10, 15 days was difficult, but then I got into the groove and started getting up at 5 a.m., 5 to 7, I would write.
Wow.
Now, somewhere, this is how powerful. And for me, somewhere, this journey has been like when the student is ready, the master
Mm.
appears. I think books are something like that. Some thought, something will come up which has been
Absolutely.
like holding you. You're like confused, should I not? And then one line you read and you're like, wow, it just makes sense. And then you move ahead. So many of them, many influential books have created that impact. But that has made me, I think, better as an individual, better as a leader. And I think leadership is a second phase of personality.
Yeah.
If I'm good as human being, if I'm authentic, if I'm being myself, if I'm growing, I'm sure that's the form that will translate to how I become as a leader. So that is
Absolutely.
how books have been helping me, and I'm sure they'll continue helping me in my journey as I go.
How lovely, how lovely. Books play such a lovely role. I'm so happy to hear as every guest talks about the role books play, my love for the books just grows, As you rightly said, I like the way you said that, it helps you to look at possibilities. It helps you to not think that I know it all. It's such a humbling experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. In
Such
fact,
a
what was happening is, see, one of the reasons that I was not into books is uh, I did not see my parents reading books.
right.
That's one of the reasons, one of the very, very important. While I come from a family where the only thing people do is get educated, but this is something I didn't see. Definitely on a lighter note, I speak to my dad about that. But from the day I started changing this behavior in our house with two kids, where there's a particular time where I read and I optically ensure that I'm in front of them reading rather than more than watching TV. One of my kid has adopted this, and he actually,
Beautiful.
when he's into books, he'll pick up books, he'll read. He was very excited when my book got published. He said, I am also going to write a book. I need to learn. So he
Love
started getting into books. Now this is leading by example, and
Fantastic.
there's nothing more powerful than your kids becoming better than you. At least for me.
Absolutely, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
this is how powerful it could be, and yeah,
So
that's
true,
that's
so
that's
true.
that's how it has
So
added
cool.
value
So
to me.
nice, so nice. I'm so happy to hear that. So there are so many books, powerful books. What made you pick Daniel's Drive? And like Marshall talks about the element of mojo. Why did you get that mojo through Drive? Why this book?
Yeah, I'll tell you what this book did to me, and how did it helped me in my function.
Yeah.
How did I help? How did it help me in my passion? And how a lot of answers that I've been looking for myself, somewhere this book helped me revalidate that.
Beautiful.
So especially because one of the organization had and would continue to have is about how do you keep your people engaged, motivated, fired up, passionate? We all talk about these terminologies,
Correct.
but we know this is never easy.
Yeah.
Right? Gallup had built research of years and years to figure out how to enhance engagement. Great Places to Work does that. Aon Hewitt does a lot of research, and people do invest time and energy to find out how to
Yeah.
get people
Yet the
to do the best. And this book, especially the concept of intrinsic motivation, the theory X, Y, and now I, it just made sense to me. And you know why? Because when I'm able to see and you put that to use in my case, and that's how I do, it just makes sense to me, because if it can work for me, it can work for others also.
Lovely.
And a lot of concept that he spoke about, when I look back at my life, I see a pattern of, yes, this is when it had happened.
Super.
While he has research, I have my own context. This is how at least I read book. If I'm able to do create something, connect to it, I find value in that. So this was one. Second, fortunately in my role, I've been able to interact a lot with people, and I'm supposed to help and work with the organizational leaders to enhance the engagement and the motivation of people. This helped me pick up quite a good concept. This I use this keyword AMP a lot. So autonomy, mastery, purpose. So AMP, I typically code things which I need to hard freeze in myself. So AMP suddenly became, I started looking at things, I would validate, see where it works, not work, in places that is work. So this is something that helped me personally. And this is also very, very powerful and close to the overall concept. And I know I keep on coming back to the power of coaching. It transformed my life. It is also about intrinsic motivation. It is about looking within, finding those answers. And what Drive has done is given it a model, structure, construct, concept, and quite a lot of them is what I use when I practice. But fundamentally, I relate to it.
Fantastic. So I think the conversation is going to be on a couple of concepts that Daniel is talking about, and we're going to listen from you, Ketan, who has tried and applied Daniel Pink's learnings at work. So tell me, with your own intrinsic motivation, experience, and the need of a coach that you've been talking about, why would you recommend, or why do you think leaders should move from a type X to a type I?
So I've worked with organizations which are very regimented business. When I say sales business, are very, very regimented business, and I'm talking about 15, 20,000 people, and then you have a hierarchy to follow. It works very, very strongly, some set of organization. Working with startup, which is very, very thought driven, where you have a knowledge worker, which is less to do with the hours of productivity, but the kind of value output that you create. While all organizations have both of, but after working with these two organizations, I realized that the world is moving more towards the knowledge work, and I'm keeping the transactional work aside. The nature of the work is where the output is very, very, so you have a defined input, the output could be defined. I'm keeping that rule aside.
Right.
Most organizations, and if you see organizations, are a lot is going to be about the value that you create for.
Your video is freezing again.
Far more.
Sorry, your video is freezing again. Sorry.
Do not.
Looks like a bandwidth issue at his side. So as we wait for Ketan to come back, he beautifully talks about the importance of books and how it transformed him as an individual from a small town boy into an extraordinary, successful leader who's an author, who's an head of HR, who's done multiple things in life. It just means that seeking knowledge and going behind knowledge, probably because we're talking about books today, using books as a tool, helps each one of us to become that better version of ourselves, become that Ketan Krishna, become that inspiring individual that Ketan is what we're talking about, right? Uh, I think it's also very important that all leaders listening to this conversation, young, middle level leaders, that through the journey of leadership, as much as we taste success, it's also important to constantly keep that drive within us for learning always burning. But the drive has to be absolutely clear.
Sorry, Raj, I've switched on to a direct network. Is the speed and the transmission okay?
No, you are
Uh,
coming very slow to me, like I'm speaking. Can you just speak a couple of sentences? I'll ask the question once again, don't worry.
Hey, Rajiv, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Okay, so I think we'll carry on with this because seems to be there's some challenge with the internet at the back.
No
I
worries, no
will
worries. Let's make one more attempt, and then because I definitely want this to be an absolutely seamless one for you, right? So I can always edit it and present it. So let me repeat the question to you, right? So Ketan, are you ready?
once again. I'm good. Yes.
Yes, Ketan. So Daniel talks about type X and type I leaders, and I'm sure you are somebody who would have seen the transition happening within yourself through the book, plus also the power of coaches that you're talking about. Why do you recommend leaders of the current era to look at moving and becoming the type I leaders and not remain as type X?
Sure. So two things here, Rajiv. One, I think it's a natural process of how we are evolving as organization. Now, type X, type Y, if you see there was context to it.
Mm,
The industries were evolving, went from industrial revolution to now when we're talking about technology revolution, there's been generation shifts that are happening. And
mm,
here I'll quote something that Marshall Goldsmith talks about in What Got You Here Will Not Take You there. As simple as that.
yeah,
So we have to evolve with times. Very important. The workforce, if you see,
mm,
it's going to be a new generation which is already in, which is the millennials,
correct.
and the Gen Zs are going to come in.
Mm,
Now, their upbringing, thinking, how they see life has been fundamentally different from what every generation of leaders would have seen.
correct.
So it's extremely important to understand your customers,
Mm,
extremely important to understand who are you going to, whose problem are you going to solve through the design thinking.
mm,
And that's where this becomes extremely powerful.
mm,
I've worked a lot with millennials, and myself being probably from the first batch of millennials, I could relate to that. If you tell me what needs to be done, you will find resistance. If you challenge me, you will see results that you have never. And I've tried and tested that one on myself and with the team members that I work with. Throw them a challenge, and they'll go figure out ways and solve for it. And that's something that I've seen in startups. Young bunch of people
mm,
who work in startups, right? But look at the drive and the motivation and the fire and the willingness to solve problems, right? Startups, when this initial phases are not best of the paymasters also. But why do people
correct.
join?
Yeah,
Because learning is humongous. The growth is humongous. The autonomy to try things and work on things that you always believe is extremely powerful. So, and this is going to be the generation of future. This is going to be larger. The proportion and the percentage of these generations becoming the first time leaders or the managers or even the workforce is only going to increase. There's no way it'll be coming back.
mm,
So this becomes even more relevant. I think what Daniel Pink did was probably ahead of his time, anticipated and probably said that this could happen. But I think this is going to be fundamentally how things are going to work as we go ahead, and especially with the millennials and the Gen Zs. A large part of the work sphere will see transitions in this direction. This is what I
absolutely, absolutely. I think
and
it makes.
Yeah, and couple add a new dimension to it. Now, the workforce of future is going to be very gig or very shared basis, right? Where people would say, "Hey, this is the project I would want to come, work, deliver, and then I'll move on."
Yeah.
Now, a lot of fundamentals of human engagement processes, system that we have learned may not work because it's short-term engagement. But what was going to drive? The person likes the challenge. And of course, there is a value of time that is happening, and the person will come and deliver superior results. So this is where I see it is moving in totality, and why this becomes so very important for every leader for today and tomorrow.
Absolutely, especially the speed also in which things are happening, right?
Oh yes.
The flexibility, adaptability, and now the like Marshall talks about, instead of avoiding, how do I get into adjustment and acceptance quickly, right? Becomes very, very important. And I think a type I will be able to do that far better than a type X of the earlier years, right? So absolutely makes tremendous sense. So now you spoke about autonomy as one very powerful element why people love to work in startup, and I'm sure that's also something that you would have loved. And you told me that, you tell me, Rajiv, I would hate it, but you challenge me, I would love to do and give you results that you could have never imagined, right? How did you use autonomy, mastery, and purpose in your own growth?
Okay, so one of the reasons why connect to this book happened is one of my first values is actually freedom or autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read this book, I realized, okay, somebody is speaking in my language. So I had a connect there because that's been my operating style. I have found it very difficult to work with micromanagers. With due respect to them, that's their operating style works, but I have a completely contrasting working style, and I see freedom and autonomy as very, very high. Now, one of the reasons I enjoy startups or join the journey of building things is it's very autonomous. The success is yours, the failures is yours. Okay, and I've seen it work. I've managed teams. I can probably tell that I had very few people who I lost voluntarily in my overall journey as a manager. Because I believe in that, I pass it on to them. For me, it has always mattered that, okay, define your space, but get this delivered. We'll talk about that. I'll let you choose when you want to deliver a project. And then people do that. It's very different because the ownership is suddenly shifted on the other side of the table. The accountability of shifted on the other side of table.
Correct.
So that has worked magical. In my coaching process, I'll talk about that later, but this is the most important thing of being autonomous and the choice that you make for yourself.
Lovely.
Mastery, I still conceptually have understood that, but there's one thing that I've not done very well is done something like, I'm not a specialist till now. Okay, in terms of one particular subject, yes, I've worked with scale up, I've worked with 0 to 1, 1 to 10 kind of an organization, but I need to find, I'm trying to get closer to my niche. Coaching is something I'm very committed to become a master at. Okay, and that's where I commit so much of time and energy to continuously doing that, because while the HR field is evolving, there is a particular kind of companies and network that I work with. But if I realize that I need to practice. Just a degree or a certification is not going to take me there. So I definitely need to that. Of course, with 14 years of practice in HR, there's a lot that I learned. I know I can do really good job at those, and that will continue to grow. I'm very clearly going to experiment that with my practice of becoming a coach of doing more and more sessions so that I become like super amazing at that. That's what I realized that my coach did to me. And the kind of changes he was able to bring was phenomenally amazing. But he spent time on that. So that's what I'm going to do. Purpose, again, something which drives the current generations and will continue driving the future generations. Purpose is the reason why I work with certain organizations. If I don't like what we're doing as an organization in long term, it won't work for me. That is my choice, my very clear selection process that I have when I pick up something that I do. At workspace, I join organizations where I like what we're trying to do. After the first stint, when I joined a company which was into ethnic fashion, the purpose was amazing. We would take from local artisans, Indian ethnic product, curate it, sell it globally. Purpose was powerful. That will keep you driving. Then you stop looking at those transactional things and the small failures and success. You are always focused on something which is bigger. IDFC Bank, rural banking. amazing purpose. When I heard the story by the then business head, I was told, I said, I want to join whatever it takes. And 2.5 years, you're solving problem of people in places where even internet cannot reach, vehicles cannot reach.
Lovely.
You're giving them access to money and credit and banking facility. Absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. One of the most purpose driven businesses that I've worked with. Matters to me. Rentomojo, current, gig economy. That's the future, because you're trying to make the world greener, better, and letting people uh, invest time in things that matters to them, rather than figuring out which TV, which fridge, which washing machine to buy and getting into the headache of taking loan and all. Gig economy, shared economy is about how do we as a community become better and grow ahead. So for me, it has been extremely important. And I have added that dimension to the decisions that I make, because if it is not adding to the long-term purpose or thing that I want to do in my life, I don't think so it makes sense for me in long term. And I do make choices on that.
Lovely.
My purpose as a coach is to reach 10 million people and say personally, and transform about 5,000 people from point A to point B. That's the purpose, that's the vision, that's the mission, that's the direction that I've picked for myself. I'm able to relate to this because I know I have defined, I did an exercise sometime back, about 5 years back, where kind of I crafted out my life purpose.
Right.
Okay? And I could relate to that. I'm happier when I'm doing things which is helping me take in that journey. And I'll read that to you. The purpose of my life is, and this is how it reads: I'm the source of positive energy that makes life beautiful.
Lovely. Lovely.
See what HR does to me. I'm somewhere helping people improve their life. What did say Utsav did, or say for that matter IDFC did, or for that matter Rentomojo is doing, somewhere doing that. What do I do as a coach? What do I do as an author? I'm on a mission. So all of these, if they're aligned, I'll be happier. If I'm happier,
Beautiful.
I'll be productive. I don't need any matrices or any incentive external to get things that I want. So this is how powerful it is. A lot of conversation these days, that's the good news, is happening around purpose. Look at every influential leader.
Yeah.
They started talking about purpose, and I was like, wow, I don't think so these definitions existed when I was studying.
You're right.
It's
You're
all
very,
about
very rightly said, Ketan. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, your like Simon's why is very clear. Your purpose is very clear, right? I think you're sending a very strong message to all the budding leaders listening to you, Ketan, that it's very important in early stage of their career to figure out what's that why that they're existing for. They just can't be jumping around and figuring out later in life. The earlier they figure out, I think they'll reach their position of flow, as Mihaly talks about earlier. The earlier they reach, they'll be happier earlier than we were all happy in our own growth as leaders, isn't it, Ketan? I think very, very thank you for articulating that and explaining that so beautifully. I'll ask you the next question, which is linked to this purpose and the flow that comes out of the purpose, right? Daniel talks about a flow test that leaders should take. And I'm sure you also must have taken your flow tests at intermittent levels. Why do you recommend the budding leaders to take that purpose test or a flow test, even if things are happening right for them? They must be going through everything smooth, hunky dory, no issues, no loss of job like you had or I had, 30% increments happening, promotions happening. Why should they still take the effort and invest time to take a flow test?
I'll use, I know I've been using COVID as a context of lately very, very much. And every single person that I've spoken to, I think if there's one takeaway that people spoke about of what this time did to them was, take a pause, look at and reflect back of what they have been doing, why they have been doing, are they on their course? And I do relate it to something what Daniel's talking about, not directly, but it is, I didn't do the flow test as is, but what I do usually is every now and then, and because I'm in the habit of writing my daily targets and goals every single day, I've been doing this for ages. Okay, it's very easy for me to go back and look at, okay, for over 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, what is typically how my time has been going and where am I putting in most of my times.
Right, right.
Simple time and motion study. Okay, and which movement, what he's saying is, I've not done that in the exact form, but the concept made sense to me. And I randomly look at my calendar and go and say, okay, how is my calendar looking? Am I too transactional? Am I this, that? Because, and there's something I've just posted on LinkedIn today is, where you invest your time determines what you value now.
Yeah.
This is how simply put what Daniel Pink is talking about. And again, very, very important, because we as humans have tendency to get used to a thing and get into our comfort zone, working like a machine.
Correct.
Okay, we need that nudge and revisit and relook and saying that, okay, how am I doing? And this self-assessment perhaps is the most powerful tool that we have as human beings, but we don't use it. We want somebody in HR, sorry, I'm not trying to say that because I'm in HR.
That's okay. I'm also an HR professional. Go ahead.
But remember, somebody would send that, hey, Ketan, do your self-assessment. And then I'll say, hey, I have to do my self-assessment. What boring activity. Hey, I have to discuss. But realize the power, what it does. So yeah, I think I will combine those and with Daniel's concept. And again, coming back to what is said in the book, that what you got here will not take you there. Very simple. Where the example that I give to people is that if you study the same way that you did to clear your 10th for your graduation, you know you will be headed for a disaster.
Yeah.
So this is how I look at the time dimension part. I have a lot of view on flow, which I'll talk later. But yeah, I think flow is how I say is these are the energy shots that we give to us to keep ourselves happy.
Correct.
Biggest example, and I think one of the a lot of things that I learned since the time I became a parent, father. But look at kids, okay? They don't get tired. They never get tired.
Yeah.
Biologically, we have more energy than any of them. But they don't get tired, we do. It is because they are in the flow. When they do something, they just do it.
Yeah. I agree. Except the sleep time, they're constantly in the flow.
Oh, yes. If you are able to push them for sleep, but before that, they're in the flow. They're there. It's about now movement. We talk about mindfulness. What is mindfulness? It is the best version of flow. It's about doing, and you spoke about a lot of gizmos and fixing, and also before any session, I spend half an hour just fixing things, because that's one of my flow movement of fixing things. I can take an electronic gizmo, something, and when I do that before the conversation,
prepares you for the occasion, isn't it?
Sorry, yeah, it does. It does. What it does, it raises your energy.
Absolutely.
It just raises. It does to me. So about 40 minutes before this conversation, I blocked everything. I've been figuring out, filtering here, this. Not that the result is something which is mattering to me, but that entire process brings me to a level where I'm like in the best flow of my mind.
Beautiful, fantastic. You know what? This effort that you did to set your studio is all nothing but doing the best of what you're doing, right? You would want to give the best. You would want the environment to experience the best from you, and for that, these are nothing but small preparations, right? And as they very powerfully say, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war.
Yeah.
So the more you're preparing yourself, you're going to make it absolutely interesting for the listeners, right? So thank you so much, Ketan, for doing that. That takes me to the next very interesting question. You spoke about mastery, right? And Daniel talks about multiple steps to achieve mastery. He talks about 5 steps. I'm going to ask you a very focused question. Leaving all of them, pick 2 that you have always constantly, consistently, and continuously worked on to achieve mastery. What are those 2?
So, for me, it would be one would be feedback when I look back, and how I focused on feedback is extremely important, because somebody on the other side is able to see and evaluate you very, very objectively. So I take it very, very seriously, and thanks to a lot of my bosses and managers. They've been very generous and very structured in giving me feedback. I accepted things and made choices of what. So okay, I'm not saying all of those feedback I took for myself and made changes. But of course, contextually, what made sense, what may help me take ahead, move ahead, something that I do. So feedback is extremely important. The good part and the possibly the bad part in the today's scenario is that, especially with the digital world, your feedback is instant.
Yeah.
Right? Your feedback is instant. You do a session, you know how people have got engaged. You look at the views, you look at how people are engaging. It's very, very instant. So that's the data information feedback. But the personal feedback, again, is very, very powerful. It has been a gold mine for me. And I'm putting this on video and record, barring 1 year, my 13 years of self-assessment and my performance conversation document, I still have them with me.
Are you serious?
I have done that, right? Because my first experience was powerful.
Wow.
And then I continued doing that. And there are times, so I have my first IDP assessment also that happened at the Birla Group. I've done 23 self-assessments also to understand myself better. But it's very powerful. Feedback, yes, all conversations I've written, what each of my bosses have said about me, what it makes, I saw a pattern, I tried to move that. But that has mattered to me a lot. So that's one thing that I've continuously done.
Lovely, lovely.
Second, of course, I think no takeaway of practice. Practice. Nothing is going to come to you if you don't take action and put effort and practice. Nothing. And I have this saying somewhere that, and you know what happens is, you can't have passion in everything that you do in life. Now, when you don't have passion, replace passion with action or practice. Is something that I say.
Yeah, which you talk in your book also, right? The only thing that's a roadblock is your inability to take action that stops you from moving from an ordinary to an extraordinary. That's your opening page of your book.
Absolutely. It just matters. If you're not passionate and all, keep that aside. Take action and practice. Take action, practice. And I'll quote, and good part is now I've started realizing a lot of those poems that I used to listen as a kid. There's one story. Remember, if I don't know if you remember, but it says karat karat abhyas te jadmati hot sujan rasri avat jate sil par padat nishan. So there's this guy. If you've seen a well, even a rope which is made of jute creates a dent in a very, very strong the boundaries of well, right?
Yeah.
This is how powerful. So that's the power of practice. So these two, if you ask me, are my favorite ones, which have of doses of which I intend to increase as I move ahead in my life.
Very powerful, very powerful. I think youngsters should pick it up straight away and go and start using it. Before that, pick up the book and read the book, obviously. It's so right? Because I think you give a nice paradigm, Ketan. It's a great learning for me, passion, keep it aside and keep practicing. I suddenly realized as you were speaking, listening to you, that you keep practicing, you do good, you practice, you do better, you practice, you do the best, and you keep bettering at your best. The passion would automatically on the right side keep increasing, right? The score will keep going up because you're loving what you're doing and you're seeing it successful, right? So the passion वैसे भी बढ़ने वाला है. So the passion doesn't have to be a feeder or an input, right? It can also be a parallel growth happening because you're practicing, doing good at it, right? Wow, that's a nice. I didn't think about that way. Thank you for that paradigm perspective.
Thank you.
You look at it. Yeah. That's why you're a coach. Lovely. So I'm going to move you to a little bit about organization, right? Now, this is all about ourselves. Now, what are we doing as leaders? Our job is to influence. That's all the only definition of leadership is for me. And influence the organization means what? We move beyond job responsibilities. You go into link responsibilities and finally talk about system responsibilities. End of the day, that's what we are there for. Else, why would we be sitting as leaders there? But when it comes to systemic responsibilities, which is huge and a huge accountability of ownership on our shoulders, Daniel talks about 9 tips to improve your company by doing multiple things as powerful leaders, as leaders who are driven, right? Which are the 2 that you have attempted and succeeded? Is my first part of the question. The second is, which are the 2 you would strongly recommend to the current budding leaders?
So for me, both would have same answers, Rajiv. And I've done that in my past organizations and some bit here, and also how when I practice and coach people. One is very important, and thanks to COVID again, this letting go of control.
Lovely.
Okay, giving up control is something, again, the reason it makes sense to me is because my autonomy as a personal value is very, very high.
Mm.
So somebody like me, if you ask me what change would you bring, and we carry our personal values to organization, that
Mm.
happens,
Mm.
right? So losing this sense of control is the most important thing that organization needs to start moving towards.
Right.
What has COVID done? It has forced people to move there.
Correct.
From watching over the shoulder of people to understand what they're doing, you're like blindly now having faith in them
Mm.
and looking at the results rather than you're doing it in 2 hours, 20 hours. Now, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
So I've always been a believer of this letting go of the time and the attendance machinery. And this was a learning. 10 years, I was like very rigid.
Mm.
But then I realized that it just doesn't make sense, at least for a lot of functions which are
Mm.
very functions which have to support to create and work and get results rather than a transactional function.
Correct. Correct.
Right? Performance management system should be the most important machinery for an organization. You look at the results.
Mm.
That should determine who you are and what you become in future. How much time did you take? Doesn't matter.
Mm.
I'm a huge follower of this gig machinery now. My sense is a lot of people in future would start working on this gig-based model.
Mm.
Again, COVID has proven that you don't need a person to be physically sitting there to work. So it can work. So I think it'll fast track a lot of those things.
Mm.
But that's one thing that I have practiced earlier. I'll continue doing that, and as I go ahead, that is the sense of the giving up of control. And when I say giving up control, the second part that comes is creating autonomy.
Right. Right.
That's the second dimension. Autonomy is, should Ketan not choose what he or she has to learn?
Mm.
Look at least, let me give you an example of how I have learned in my life.
Mm.
Somebody decided which school to go. Fine. As a kid, parents had to do it. After 10th, somebody decided what subject should I read, science or maths or science or arts or biology. So that happened. After that, you come to graduation. College describes the syllabus. You have to go through it without knowing will it make sense or not. You keep on learning that.
Mm.
Ends. Postgraduate, again, professor, course, curriculum. I'm sure they're all well thought through, right? I reach organizations. The talent partner or the L&D or the manager or the leaders decide what do I learn and what do I do with that learning.
Mm.
They're right. See, all these systems are super important. But there is another dimension, which is my own learning. What do I need to learn? What do I do with that learning?
Correct.
Unless until that will happen, people will think that people will give it a lot to organizational weight for miracles to be done by this HR guy or the leader or the manager. There's so much expectation that gets built
I agree.
because we are controlling.
I
We give
agree.
it to people, okay, Ketan, this is your career. What do you want to be? I want to become this. Okay, what do you want to learn? This is what I want to learn. This is how I want to learn. This is what I want to do with the learning.
Yeah.
And very important, organizations and leaders will invest in what they believe is right for you and for the organization.
Mm.
How about your own decisions?
Correct.
Right? So that's why autonomy and this losing control very interlinked. But these are the two things that I've brought to organizations that I've worked with, if not at least my team. And yes, I intend. This is my message to everybody. Think aloud on these two things.
Correct.
Do a quick dipstick. Speak to 20 millennials. You will see these two coming as very, very, very important
Pattern.
dimensions and patterns of what they're looking at. So maybe it's the time is also asking for it and supremely important.
I agree. I think organizations also have to now get super aware of this bit, right? Because if you actually see you as head of HR, I'm a partner, right? If I work with you, for me, you're only a customer. But the employee who will go through the intervention that I'll probably design for you is the consumer.
Yes.
And my focus is not on the customer, which is you. And this intervention would be designed, let's say, between you and me together. Both of us, the focus is on the consumer, which is a poor employee who's coming to a classroom, figure going, "Yeah, मैं करने क्या वाला हूँ?"
Yeah.
और classroom में निकल के क्या करने वाला हूँ? Till that question is not answered, the intervention is just waste of money, waste of effort, isn't it? I think it's beautifully said. The focus is more on what does that individual want. Like for you, it's autonomy and mastery. Maybe for the other person, it could be something else.
Yeah. And this accountability and ownership of learning being with the learner is a very, very powerful thing. And this is where we see, look at why e-learning companies or self-learning or the content consumption has shot up. Even before COVID, it started because I'm able to choose what I learn, when I learn, what do I do with the learning. It may not be directly linked to what I'm doing as a function, but it's out of passion. So, hey, let me do that. So, these are the two. And glad you called it out. Extremely important. We're seeing data and trends happening in this.
Are you somewhere saying that we should completely leave it to the individual and organization to learn, and you don't need an L&D function or an HR function to drive it and channelize it?
No, I'm saying a hybrid model where an organization, see, as an individual, I may not know, I know what is good for me, but I'm also there in a relationship with an organization, which is a two-way to a larger purpose we are driving. So I have my own individual purpose and aspirations and goals, and there's an organization purpose and aspiration and goal. There's an alignment that has to be here. Okay, so a mix of these two. How do you create a balance? And I think in the book he talks about some companies practicing this 20% your own time, your own learning. I'm talking about a balance. See, organizations are there for a particular value to be created for multiple people, including employees. So that cannot be completely given away. But how do you create a balance between these two? You still have to, if there's a process training or a value training that you have to undergo because that matters, you have to undergo that.
Absolutely.
But at the dimension of self-learning, so on things that you enjoy. So I'm talking about a hybrid model, and not as a model that is only one-sided. It won't work. We're not ready for that.
Yeah. Especially with the youngsters and the self-learning audience, it definitely has to be not just fed from one side, but from both the sides. It absolutely makes sense. Super. Thank you so much, Ketan. You know what? For interest of time, we had multiple points that you brought in. The type X, type Y difference was very, very powerful. I love how autonomy, mastery, and purpose you also recommend for the youngsters to kind of pick it up and make them as three elements for their own drive, right? It's also interesting to see that you're talking about organizations focusing on the person and what the person wants to consume, and not about what the organization wants to feed. I think there's a great transition that needs to happen in very many organizations, whether it is Rentomojo or even Google's, even that size organization probably would need, right? Because one fundamental question is there are a lot of self-learning things, but the adoption is still a question. Maybe the organization will have to play a significant role to ensure that they're able to increase the adoption percentage, right? Today in India, it still stands at a fairly low number. We may all have to do something to get that number up, right? But I think beyond all this, what brings in beautiful in this conversation is the small elements that Daniel talks about in the book Drive. We brought it out for the audience. I think the budding leaders would go with one thing is I would want them to go back and look at your profile, and if they were the ordinary guys, become that one more extraordinary guy like you are, Ketan. So thank you so much for inspiring the audience and the listeners. It was lovely talking to you. I leave this conversation with last one question. How did you enjoy the experience of leaders and libraries? And thank you for coming in.
Thank you. I'll share just one quick liner on how. So Daniel talks about this concept of I, the multiple dimension. I'll tell you one more dimension of how to look at this I. One of the biggest outcomes or drivers or way to measure if somebody's into something or not, in terms of if the drive is intrinsic or not, is if the person typically passes on this task to somebody else, or like just does it, right? Okay. Now I want you to write the word, and for anyway, all listeners, write the word pass and write the word on.
Pass it?
Pass on.
Okay. Pass on. I'm writing it. Okay.
Okay. So this is something which is a problem. Now just add an I between and you see what word you will get.
I love it.
This is how powerful intrinsic motivation and things from within when it comes makes a difference to you. So a passion becomes passion because you put I into it. So an I is again what Daniel is talking about. I is in our coaching parlance, we talk about I as an instrument of change, all these combined. So the reason I got excited about this conversation, this book, is because it's something that I believe in. When I met, and thank you so much for this opportunity, Rajiv. One of the most unique concepts, but it is powerful. And somewhere what you're trying to do is take a lot of learning which is available and pass it on to people's structure and put it to use. See, a learning not put to use is not the best form of learning and not the best form of justice we are doing to people who have written that. So what you're trying to do is phenomenal. I've never heard of something like this. It's going to be interesting. I'm waiting for a day when I will be able to experience that as an audience, as a personal person. Of course, I would, if nothing, learn 5 things new that particular day. But amazing thing that you're doing. I think the purpose is powerful, and of course, you bring a lot of mastery there. I'm certain about that. So, all the very best. Thank you for having me here, and hope I was able to create some value for everybody.
Absolutely, Ketan. Thank you so much for articulating them so beautifully. Despite the one or two glitches that happened, I think you came in and gave very clear answers. And from the first day that I spoken to you, and that's probably you have acquired it over the years of being a coach. You have this clarity of thought, and that comes out in terms of clarity of word. That's very, very clear. You can take it as a compliment, Ketan. There is absolutely no time gap between your thought and the words, and I can experience that. It just comes out.
And thank you so much for calling that out. This is new me. This is me over last 2 years,
Lovely.
2.5 years. And I will tell you, books have been a very, very important piece because they help you build a thought and a point of view.
Correct.
And of course, when I wrote it, I knew that I could carry a point of view. So the gap, the distance between my head, heart, and mouth probably reduced. So but books, guys, books. I know I've not read it for 10 years, but I'm telling you for a fact that do not. This is kind of non-negotiable. If I have the authority to tell you what needs to be done, but read, push yourself. There's you will, and please do not do it in your free time, because then you're undervaluing it yourself. The biggest mistake that we do, saying that when I'm free, I'll do this, which means it's secondary. Push yourself. Get that 15 minutes. I'm not even talking about world of change. You will realize how powerful it could become to you as you go ahead. So make them your best friends. And thank you, Rajiv, again for leading a change from front by an initiative like that.
Thank you.
Glad I was able to contribute.
Thank you. That was a powerful closing message for the audience. I think this makes absolute sense. Don't read it on free time. Read it for it.
Yes.
Then you see the value to it. There's a money to it. There's effort to it that will come out. Thank you so much, Ketan. Look forward to meeting you sometime as things open up.
Absolutely.
Till then, you take care and have a lovely time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Bye.